Now, we know that Deontay Wilder talks an extraordinary amount of absolute rubbish. I mean, Twilight Zone stuff, particularly after the second loss to Tyson Fury. I mean, the excuses this guy was coming out with, saying that the referee was in on a plot and his own cornerman poisoned the water and Tyson Fury had weights in his glove. I mean, just a whole heap of absolute psychedelic madness. So when he's talking about this Andy Ruiz negotiation, I'm not taking what Deontay Wilder is saying at face value. Having said that, it doesn't mean that Deontay is going to be talking nonsense every single time he opens his mouth. Occasionally, he might be saying things that are valid or true. So I'm aware of that too. You use your discernment. Anyway, in this instance, Deontay Wilder is now saying that Andy Ruiz is asking 50-50. Well, he said that before. He's also saying he's asking for a rematch clause. Now, with regards to the 50-50, they're both former champions. Deontay Wilder, I think, overall has earned more money in his career, but Andy Ruiz does have this a relatively big fan base. And as I asked in the previous video I did about this fight, who sold more tickets and did more pay-per-views for their last contests? With Wilder, it was against Robert Helenius, and with Andy Ruiz, it was against Luis Ortiz. Who sold the most? Because whoever sold the most might be the A-side. Now, some people say it's unfair because Robert Helenius isn't the same level of opponent as Luis Ortiz. So, okay, I get that. But it'll at least give us a ballpark idea of who the bigger name is, right? If Deontay Wilder was offering Andy Ruiz, let's say 40%, I'd say that's reasonable. 50-50, you can't complain at either, but 40%, okay. As far as the rematch clause, again, we don't know if Andy Ruiz and his team are asking for a rematch clause, but as far as I'm concerned, there should be absolutely no rematch clause in this bout because it's a final eliminator. The standard procedure for final eliminators is that there is no rematch because the idea is the winner of the bout goes straight into a title shot. Or they can if they wish. I mean, they can have some stay busy bouts while they wait for their title shot. But once you win the final eliminator, you become mandatory. That means your title shot is guaranteed. So why on earth would you be in a situation like that and then have to rematch the guy that you just beat to get a title shot? It don't make no sense. So normally with, final eliminators, the sanctioning body not only sets the purse split, which is something that needs to be sorted out in this fight, they set the purse split. They give an allotted amount of time for the two sides to negotiate, which is usually 30 days. And if they can't come to an agreement, it goes to purse bids. The WBC in this instance has done neither of those things, which is extremely frustrating. And you really have to wonder why the WBC hasn't done it. This should have gone to purse bids about 2 months ago. Why hasn't it gone to purse bids, Al Heyman? In fact, that was a Freudian slip. I meant to say Mauricio Sullivan, and perhaps it's Al Heyman is the reason that it hasn't gone to purse bids, potentially, because Al Heyman seems to have a very good relationship with Mauricio Sullivan, very close relationship, very cozy relationship. And the WBC rules, at least some of them, if you've read them, are so vague that they could be applied in an arbitrary fashion. And they're deliberately that way. It's kind of like the YouTube terms of service, right? Extremely vague so they can be applied in an arbitrary fashion. Yeah, WBC rules, same thing. Very, very vague. And that allows them to basically do what they want. Virtually anyway, with a lot of the rules, the WBC. And in this case, as I say, purse bid should have been called ages ago for this fight. That would have sorted out the purse split. Because if the two sides can't agree on who gets what, the sanctioning body steps in and says, bam, this is going to a purse bid, this is the split, and the fight has to happen within this period of time. That's the great thing about final eliminators, right? And mandatories and stuff like that. But in this situation, hey, you guys tell me what's going on. Because all these problems they're having would be sorted out if the WBC just did their job. Same with the rematch clause. Yeah, the WBC in a final eliminator, they don't normally allow rematches unless there's exceptional circumstances. Let's say a final eliminator ends in a very unsatisfactory fashion, like someone gets disqualified or there's a really controversial decision or a freak injury, then the loser can lobby the WBC and sometimes they'll grant them a rematch with the person they just fought the eliminator with. But we're talking about exceptional circumstances. Normally, if there's a decisive winner first time around in a final eliminator, there is no rematch. And that's the way it should be because we're trying to keep the division moving. If you think about it as a conveyor belt of contenders, you're trying to get them to the end of the conveyor belt so they can get their title shot. And when you've got two guys like Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz holding up the conveyor belt, because they're ranked like number 1 and number 2 in the WBC, they're holding things up by not fighting each other. Either pull out of the final eliminator and give the number one and number two spots to other fighters who are willing to fight each other, or fight each other. This whole thing is ridiculous. Since the very start, Ruiz has seemed more keen on this fight than Wilder, to me. Wilder's been looking everywhere else other than at Andy Ruiz, including his trainer Malik Scott over the past few months, who said, oh, you know, Ruiz is there, but we'd rather fight Joshua and all these bigger fights. There's pressure coming from somewhere for Deontay Wilder to fight Andy Ruiz, or he wouldn't be entertaining it at all. So there's pressure coming from somewhere. And, you know, earlier on in the year, he wasn't keen on the fight. Now, all of a sudden, he's acting like Ruiz doesn't want it. That's a load of nonsense. Ruiz has wanted the fight from the start, and Wilder's wanted to go in different directions. Is Deontay Wilder trying to price himself out with all this 70-30 stuff? Maybe he is, but again, if the WBC just did their job and do what they would normally do in a final eliminator, all of these problems disappear. I'll leave it there.